The champagne bubbled in crystal flutes all around me, but the sweet taste had turned bitter in my mouth. I stood frozen. A porcelain smile etched across my face as laughter echoed through the grand ballroom. My husband's voice cut through the chatter, clear as a knife. "You're looking at the woman who used to scrub other people's toilets for a living," Daniel announced, his arms slung around his colleague's shoulder. "Picked her up like a stray dog. No, she just organizes my calendar instead." More laughter, more clinking glasses. The room spun slightly as I gripped my purse tighter, knuckles white with strain. I excused myself with practiced grace. Walked not. Ran to the exit. No tears. Not yet. The valet brought my car. 3 hours later, I drove away from the glittering corporate headquarters without looking back. That's all it took for the carefully constructed empire my husband thought was his to crumble into dust. 3 hours before his phone blew up with desperate calls. 3 hours before his boss was begging for my help. 3 hours before his brothers were frantically searching for me. 3 hours to remind them all of exactly who I was. And it wasn't just a maid. The alarm clock glowed red at 4:30 a.m. when I slid out of bed, careful not to disturb Daniel. He needed his rest for the big promotion party tonight, the culmination of everything we'd worked toward for the past 7 years. Everything I had worked toward if anyone had bothered to keep track. I padded silently to the kitchen of our penthouse apartment and started the coffee, mentally reviewing the day ahead. The caterers would arrive at the office by noon. The decorations needed final approval. The guest list required one last check to make sure no potential investors had been overlooked. Details upon details that Daniel never concerned himself with. "Morning, beautiful," he mumbled 45 minutes later, finding me already dressed and working on my laptop at the kitchen island. He kissed the top of my head absently, the way someone might pat a familiar pet. "Good morning," I replied, sliding his coffee across the counter. "Black, 2 sugars. Your blue tie is pressed and hanging in the closet. It photographs better with the new suit. I've moved your 9 a.m. with Peterson to tomorrow so you can focus on your speech." Daniel grunted appreciation, scrolling through his phone. "Did you transfer the funds for the down payment on the lake house yesterday?" "The papers are ready to sign next week." He winked and disappeared into the shower, where he would spend exactly 17 minutes before emerging to dress in the clothes I had selected. Once I had found this routine comforting. The clear expectations, the quiet efficiency, the way Daniel's career had become our shared purpose after I'd left my own dreams behind. Dreams that had once seemed so important before I met him. Dreams of running my own business. Dreams born from necessity. When I'd arrived in this country with nothing but determination and a willingness to clean houses to make ends meet, my phone buzzed with a text from Sophia, Daniel's executive assistant at Montgomery Financial. "Is he ready for tonight? Johnson's bringing the Singapore investors." I texted back quickly, speech revised to include their specific interests. Chart places them next to Daniel. Special menu accommodations made. "You're a lifesaver, Alina. Don't know what we'd do without you." I smiled faintly. If only Daniel shared that sentiment. The day passed in a blur of preparations. I arrived at Montgomery Financial's headquarters 2 hours before the event to oversee the final arrangements. The ballroom's transformation was stunning. Crystal chandeliers cast warm light over tables draped in midnight blue. The company colors were displayed with subtle elegance. Champagne towers, fresh flower arrangements, and a string quartet in the corner created the atmosphere of success and stability the firm wanted to project. "Alina." Richard Montgomery himself approached, arms outstretched. Silver-haired and commanding, he'd built the investment firm from nothing 30 years ago. "This looks magnificent." "You've outdone yourself." "Thank you, sir." I accepted his brief hug. I wanted everything to be perfect for Daniel's big night. "It's lucky to have you," Richard said, lowering his voice. "Between us, half the reason he got this promotion is because of how well you handle our clients." That dinner you organized for the Japanese delegation last month sealed the deal. I nodded, accepting the compliment while knowing Daniel would never acknowledge my contribution. In his mind, I was just the supportive wife who happened to be good with details. A former maid who should be grateful for the life he'd given me. Ah, speak of the devil, Richard boomed as Daniel approached, resplendent in his tailored suit. Richard, Daniel shook his hand firmly, ready to make me the youngest VP in company history. More than ready, Richard answered, clapping him. On the back, Alina has created quite the celebration. Daniel glanced around, his eyes skimming over the meticulous details without truly seeing them. She's good at that sort of thing. The guests began arriving, financial executives, potential clients, city officials whose goodwill could ease regulatory hurdles. I stood by Daniel's side, whispering names and important details about each person before they reached us. The perfect corporate wife navigating social dynamics with practiced ease. Mr. Zheng, so pleased you could join us, I said smoothly to a key investor, covering for the fact that Daniel had forgotten our briefing about him entirely. Daniel was just telling me how impressed he was with your innovative approach to the Asian markets. Mrs. Montgomery Zhang responded warmly. Your husband is fortunate to have such a knowledgeable partner. Daniel laughed, a sound that didn't quite reach his eyes. Which keeps me organized, that's for sure. The night progressed and I circulated through the crowd, putting out small fires before they could erupt into problems. A client with a food allergy who received the wrong plate, potential conflict between competing firms seated at the same table, the missing gift bags for the VIP guests that I located and distributed with quiet efficiency. Then came the speeches. Richard went first, announcing Daniel's promotion with grand declarations about his vision and leadership. The room applauded enthusiastically as Daniel took the stage, his charisma on full display. I want to thank everyone who made this possible, Daniel said, his voice confident and strong. Richard, for seeing my potential, my team for their dedication, double quotes, he paused, raising his glass. And of course, my beautiful wife, Alina. A warm murmur of approval rippled through the room. For a moment, I felt a flicker of hope. Recognition perhaps for everything I'd contributed. Not bad for a woman I found cleaning houses, right? Daniel continued, and my heart froze. She was a maid before I married her. The classic American dream story. Now she organizes my calendar instead. Laughter filled the room. Not everyone, but enough. His closest colleagues, men who'd been to our home, eaten meals I'd prepared, received gifts I'd selected for their families. Seriously, though, Daniel continued, oblivious to my stiffening posture. She's come a long way from scrubbing toilets. More laughter. Daniel raised his glass higher, clinking with his coworkers around him. You're just a maid who got lucky, he said, the words aimed at me but performative for his audience. My little Cinderella story. I felt eyes on me from all directions. Some sympathetic, others amused, most uncomfortable. But in that moment, something crystallized inside me, a cold clarity I'd never experienced before. I smiled, not the practiced, perfect smile of Daniel Montgomery's wife, but something else entirely, something that must have looked strange on my face, because his smirk faltered slightly. Without a word, I gathered my purse, nodded politely to those nearest me, and walked out of the ballroom. No scene, no tears. Just the quiet click of my heels against marble floors as I made my exit. In the privacy of my car, I pulled out my phone and made 3 calls. Just 3. Then I drove home, changed into comfortable clothes, and waited. 3 hours, that's all it would take. 7 years earlier, I had been Alina Vasquez, not Alina Montgomery. 26 years old and cleaning houses to pay my way through night classes in business administration. My hands were raw from cleaning products. My back ached constantly, but my mind was sharp and my determination sharper. Maria, my roommate and fellow cleaner, often scolded me for taking on too many clients. "You're killing yourself, Alina," she'd say, watching me prepare my supplies. The night before. 6 houses tomorrow. "That's impossible. I need the money," I'd reply simply. "Tuition is due next month." What Maria didn't know, what no one knew, was that I wasn't just cleaning those houses, I was studying them. Learning about the people who lived in them through their possessions, their habits, their messes. Understanding how wealth worked by observing it up close. The Harrisons left financial statements on their desks that I carefully read while dusting. The Chunes had investment books I'd skimmed during my lunch breaks. The Wilsons fought loudly about money while I vacuumed their bedroom, revealing strategies and mistakes I filed away in my growing mental database. I was invisible to them, just a maid. But I was learning, always learning. The Montgomery penthouse was added to my client list on a Tuesday. The regular cleaner had quit without notice, and the agency sent me as an emergency replacement. It was the most luxurious home I'd ever entered, with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city and minimalist furniture that probably cost more than I'd earn in a decade. I was carefully cleaning the home office when the door swung open and Daniel Montgomery stormed in, talking loudly on his phone. "No, listen to me," he barked, not even glancing my way. "The acquisition only works if we can quietly buy up the smaller firms first. Otherwise, Johnson will realize what we're doing and jack up the price." He paced back and forth, continuing to outline what was clearly a complex financial strategy. I kept cleaning, ears perked while appearing focused on my task. "The real value is in their client list," Daniel continued. "Those 3 developers alone would bring us ... He finally noticed me, frowning slightly. "Let me call you back." He ended the call and looked at me suspiciously. "Who are you?" "Lena Vasquez. Your regular cleaner couldn't make it. Apologize for the intrusion. I can come back later." "No, it's fine. Just..." He gestured vaguely. "Be quick about it." I nodded dutifully and continued working. But when he left, I examined the papers. On his desk more carefully, a merger strategy. Acquisition targets. Daniel Montgomery was planning to consolidate several small property development firms before approaching a larger company, creating leverage for himself in the process. It was smart, very smart. 3 weeks later, when I arrived to clean, Daniel was home again, this time cursing at his laptop. "Problem?" I asked, setting down my cleaning caddy. He looked up, clearly not having expected the maid to address him directly. "Nothing important." "Sometimes a fresh perspective helps," I offered. When he continued staring, I added, "I'm studying business administration. Maybe I could help." He laughed, the same dismissive laugh I would come to know so well. "Sure, why not? My entire presentation is corrupt, hours before a major client meeting, and the maid is going to fix it." I sat down. "May I?" Still amused at what he clearly thought was absurd presumption, he stepped away from the laptop. I sat down and examined the Excel spreadsheet that had apparently triggered the file corruption. "You're using nested if statements with circular references," I said after a few minutes. "That's causing the crashes. Let me restructure this with lookup instead." 30 minutes later, his presentation was not only working, but significantly improved. With cleaner data visualization and more compelling projections. Daniel stared at me with new eyes. "Who are you again, Alina?" "I clean your apartment on Tuesdays." "Not anymore," he said. "I want to hire you privately as my assistant." That was the beginning. 6 months later, we were dating. A year after that, married. I stopped cleaning houses and enrolled in a top business school, with Daniel proudly telling everyone how he discovered a diamond in the rough. What he didn't tell them was how extensively I helped with his work, how I restructured his client presentations, how I remembered every detail about potential investors that he invariably forgot, how I translated complicated financial concepts into strategies that impressed his superiors. I was no longer just a maid, but I was still invisible in a different way, the secret weapon he never acknowledged. By our 3rd anniversary, I had developed a network of my own at Montgomery Financial. Richard Montgomery himself often called me directly when he needed something handled discreetly. The senior partners' wives confided in me during company events. The secretaries and assistants throughout the firm came to me with information and requests that bypassed formal channels. I knew everything that happened at Montgomery Financial. Every affair, every financial trouble, every pending deal, every personal grudge. Information is power, and I had been collecting it meticulously for years, all while Daniel continued to see me as just his wife. The former maid, who should be eternally grateful that he had lifted her from obscurity, even when I structured the deal that earned him this promotion, finding the tax loophole that made the acquisition of Eastern Properties possible at a fraction of its market value. Daniel took full credit. Women don't understand the complexity of high finance, he'd explained patronizingly when I suggested my name should be included in the official paperwork. And now tonight, he had humiliated me publicly, called me just a maid in front of everyone who mattered in our world. As I sat in our living room, still in my elegant blue dress from the party, I opened my laptop and began implementing the plan I had quietly prepared months ago, not expecting to need it so soon, but always knowing this day might come. Daniel had no idea what was about to hit him. No idea at all. Daniel's first call came at 11:47 p.m., exactly 2 hours and 38 minutes after I'd left the party. I let it ring through to voicemail. Alina, where are you? Johnson is asking about the Singapore contract details. Call me back. His tone was annoyed, but not alarmed. Not yet. The second call came 4 minutes later. Seriously, Alina, this is important. The Singaporeans are ready to sign tonight, but there's some issue with the numbers. I don't keep track of that stuff. By the third call, irritation had edged into concern. Lena, I don't know what game you're playing, but I need you at the office now. Richard is asking for you. I smiled faintly, imagining the scene unfolding at Montgomery Financial. By now, the celebratory atmosphere would be giving way to confusion as the Singapore investors raised questions about discrepancies in the proposal discrepancies I had carefully planted that morning, knowing they would only become apparent. When the final papers were reviewed, my phone buzzed with a text from Sophia, Daniel's executive assistant. Alina, please call emergency at the office. The Singapore deal is falling apart. I took a sip of the tea I'd made and opened my secure email account, the one Daniel knew nothing about. With calm, deliberate keystrokes, I sent 3 pre-drafted messages to carefully selected recipients. The first went to Lisa Chen, legal counsel for the Singapore Investment Group, and more importantly, a woman I had quietly befriended over the past year through our shared love of classical music. Lisa, as discussed previously, the irregularities in sections 5.3 to 5.7 warrant further examination. Suggest comparing with the original Eastern Properties documentation I shared last month. Alina, the second email went to Thomas Wright, financial reporter for the Wall Street Journal and occasional tennis partner of Daniel's. Thomas had been trying to get an inside scoop on Montgomery Financial for years, always hitting walls of secrecy. Thomas, regarding our conversation at the charity gala last month. The documentation you requested about Montgomery's acquisition practices is attached. My only condition remains anonymity. A concerned party, the third email went to Richard Montgomery. Himself, Richard, by now you're aware of the issues with the Singapore proposal. What you don't yet know is that Daniel has been diverting client funds through shell companies for personal investments. Records attached. I've always respected you, which is why you're receiving this before the SEC does. You have until morning to address this internally. Elena, my phone exploded with notifications as the emails landed. Daniel called twice more in quick succession, his messages growing increasingly desperate. Alina, what the hell did you do? Richard is asking about offshore accounts I've never even heard of. Call me now. Next came a call from Richard Montgomery himself, which I allowed myself to answer on the fourth ring. Alina, his voice was tightly controlled but couldn't hide the underlying panic. We need to talk. Yes, I imagine we do, I replied calmly. Is this about Daniel calling me just a maid in front of your most important clients? Or about the fraudulent accounts he's been using to siphon investor funds? A sharp intake of breath. You know I had nothing to do with. I know exactly who did what, Richard. I've documented everything for the past 3 years. Silence stretched between us before he spoke again. What do you want? Such a simple question with such a complex answer. What did I want? Revenge, yes, but not the fleeting satisfaction of seeing Daniel humiliated as he had humiliated me. I wanted more, much more. I want what I've earned, I said simply. Full partnership, my name on the door. Public acknowledgement of my role in the Eastern Properties acquisition and the Singapore deal. That's unprecedented. The board would never. The board will do exactly as you recommend when the alternative is federal indictment. I interrupted smoothly. I have copies of everything, Richard. Everything. Another long silence before he cleared his throat. Come to the office. We need to discuss this properly. I'll be there in 30 minutes. And Richard, I added, make sure Daniel understands exactly who he's been calling just a maid all these years. As I ended the call, my phone lit up again, this time with a call from Miguel, Daniel's younger brother. Kana. Thank God, he gasped when I answered. Daniel's falling apart. Happening? Miguel had always been kind to me, the only member of Daniel's family who treated me with genuine respect rather than veiled condescension. The truth is happening, Miguel, I said, softening my tone slightly. Daniel has been breaking the law and taking credit for my work for years. Tonight, he decided to publicly humiliate me on top of everything else. The maid comments, Miguel groaned. I was there. Should have said something, but you didn't. I pointed out no one did. What can I do? He asked quietly. Nothing. This is between me, Daniel, and Montgomery Financial now. I just answered because I've always liked you, Miguel. You should know your brother is about to face some very serious consequences. I ended the call and stood up, smoothing down my dress. In my closet was a small suitcase I'd packed that morning. Not because I'd known exactly what would happen tonight, but because I'd recognized the signs that Daniel was pulling further away from me. It's taking me more and more for granted. The final call came as I was applying fresh lipstick, a deep, confident red I rarely wore. Alina, Daniel's voice was raw, frantic. Please, I don't understand what's happening. Don't you? I asked softly. You called me just a maid tonight. Daniel, in front of everyone. That was a joke. Come on, you know I didn't mean ... double quotes. You meant exactly what you said. I've always been just a maid to you. The woman who cleans up your messes and makes your life run smoothly without recognition or respect. That's not fair. I gave you everything. No, I cut him off sharply. I gave you everything. My intelligence, my network, my strategies. Eastern Properties deal was my creation from start to finish. The Singapore investors are my personal connections. Even your promotion speech, I wrote every word of it, including, ironically, the part where you were supposed to genuinely thank me instead of mock me. His breathing was ragged on the other end of the line. What do you want? Money? Is that? I'll put the lake house in your name. Oh, I don't want anything from you, Daniel. Not anymore. I'll be at the office in 20 minutes to meet with Richard. I suggest you prepare yourself. Elena, please, he begged, his voice cracking. I love you. I closed my eyes briefly, searching for even a flicker of the feelings I'd once had for this man. There was nothing but cold clarity. Goodbye, Daniel. I disconnected the call and picked up my keys. Outside, the night was clear and cool, the city lights spreading out below our penthouse like scattered diamonds. For 7 years, I had lived in this glass tower, playing the role of the grateful immigrant wife, the former maid who had married above her station. That woman was gone. In her place stood someone new, or perhaps someone who had been there all along, waiting for the right moment to emerge. as I drove toward Montgomery Financial's gleaming headquarters, where I knew Richard, Daniel, and likely the entire executive board would be waiting in panic. I smiled to myself. 3 hours. That's all it had taken to remind them exactly who I was, and I was not had never been just a maid. Montgomery Financial's lobby was very quiet when I arrived. The celebration had clearly ended, replaced by what I imagined was frantic damage control happening on the top floor. Carter, the night security guard, nodded respectfully as I approached. "They're waiting for you in the main boardroom, Mrs. Montgomery." "Thank you, Carter." "And how's your daughter's college application coming along?" I asked, remembering our conversation from last week. His face brightened momentarily. "She got into Columbia thanks to that recommendation letter you arranged. We can never thank you enough." "She earned it," I replied with a genuine smile. "Give her my congratulations." This was the network I had carefully cultivated over the years, from security guards to cleaning staff to executive assistants. It's the invisible workforce that kept everything running, that knew every secret and overheard every conversation. Daniel had never understood the power in these connections, had never bothered to learn the names of the people he considered beneath him. The elevator ride to the executive floor gave me a moment to center myself. When the doors opened, Sophia was waiting, her expression a mix of awe and apprehension. "Alina," she whispered, walking quickly beside me down the corridor. "It's chaos in there. Richard has the whole board on conference calls. The SEC compliance officer is having what looks like a nervous breakdown. And Daniel ... She trailed off. "And Daniel?" I prompted. "I've never seen him like this. It's completely unraveling." I nodded, unsurprised. Daniel had always crumbled under real pressure, another weakness I had compensated for throughout our marriage. "Who else is here physically?" I asked. "Richard, Daniel, Westbrook from legal. And the Johnson brothers with 2 of the Singapore investors," Sophia replied efficiently. "The rest are on secure lines." "Perfect." All the key players were present. "Thank you, Sophia," I said, pausing before the imposing boardroom doors. "Whatever happens next, I want you to know I've always appreciated your work." She touched my arm lightly. "For what it's worth, Alina, everyone here knows who really makes things happen. What Daniel said tonight was ... She shook her head in disgust. With a deep breath, I pushed open the doors and entered. The boardroom fell silent immediately. 12 men in expensive suits turned to stare, their expressions ranging from anger to fear to confusion. At the head of the table sat Richard Montgomery, looking 10 years older than he had at the party hours before. To his right was Daniel, his face ashen, tie loosened, and hair disheveled. Alina Richards stood, gesturing to an empty chair. "Please, join us." I remained standing. "I prefer to stand. Thank you." Mrs. Montgomery, Mr. Lim, one of the Singapore investors, nodded respectfully. "Perhaps you can explain the concerning discrepancies we've discovered in the proposal." "Gladly," I replied, setting my purse on the table and retrieving a slim folder. "What you found are deliberate errors I inserted this morning. A test, if you will, to see if anyone in this room actually reviews the details of their own deals." Murmurs rippled around the table. "The real proposal," I continued, sliding the folder toward Mr. Lim, "is here, with the correct figures. You'll find it increases your projected return by approximately 4.2% while lowering your initial exposure." Mr. Lim opened the folder, his eyebrows rising as he scanned the documents inside. He whispered something to his colleague, who nodded appreciatively. "This is substantially better than what we were initially shown," he confirmed. "Because I wrote it," I said simply. "Just as I wrote the Eastern Properties acquisition strategy that earned Montgomery Financial over $300 million last quarter. Just as I've written every major proposal that has crossed Daniel's desk for the past 5 years." Daniel flinched visibly but remained silent. Richard cleared his throat uncomfortably. Lena has been an invaluable consultant to our operations. Not consultant, I corrected calmly. Partner. Unacknowledged, uncredited, and unpaid, but partner nonetheless. I turned to face the room fully. Gentlemen, for years I have shaped the strategies that have made many of you very wealthy. I've done this from the shadows because I believed in building something meaningful with my husband. I looked directly at Daniel now, meeting his pleading, eyes without emotion. Tonight, my husband made it abundantly clear how he views my contributions. He called me just a maid in front of all of you, mocking the work I did to put myself through business school. Work I have never been ashamed of. What a tasteless joke. Richard attempted to interject, one we all found inappropriate. Yet none of you said anything, I observed. It wasn't a joke. It was a glimpse of the truth. Daniel's truth, his belief that no matter what I contribute, I will always be beneath him, beneath all of you. I reached into my purse again and removed a USB drive, placing it carefully on the polished table. This contains documented evidence of financial irregularities within Montgomery Financial, specifically within accounts managed directly by Daniel Montgomery. Accounts that have been used to divert client funds into personal investments. Daniel surged to his feet. That's a lie. I never. The Cayman account under Westlake Holdings I cut in smoothly. The Shell Corporation in Singapore registered to your mother's maiden name. The property purchases in Colorado through third-party intermediaries using client collateral as leverage without disclosure. With each example, Daniel's face grew paler. The board members exchanged alarmed glances. Lena Richards' voice had a warning edge. These are serious allegations that should be discussed privately. They should have been discussed privately. I agreed. But that time has passed. I've given you copies of everything. The originals have been secured with my attorney, with instructions to forward them to the SEC, the FBI's Financial Crimes Unit, and the Wall Street Journal if anything should happen to me or if my terms are not met. The room erupted into chaos, voices raised in alarm, demands for explanations, accusations flying between board members. Richard pounded the table for order while Daniel sank back into his chair, staring at me as if seeing me for the first time. When the noise subsided, I continued calmly. I have no desire to destroy Montgomery Financial. Many good people work here, and many clients depend on the firm's stability. What I want is simple: full recognition of my contributions, a named partnership, and Daniel's immediate resignation. Can't be serious? One of the older board members sputtered. A partnership? You're not even qualified. I turned to him with a cold smile. Harold, 3 months ago, when your mistress threatened to tell your wife about the apartment you keep for her in Tribeca, you quietly arranged the additional payment that kept her silent. When your son was arrested for driving last year, who made the calls that kept it out of the papers? His face drained of color. I turned to another board member. James, the Westridge deal that saved your department from collapse, whose strategy was that? Who spent 48 hours straight reworking the numbers when the initial approach failed? One by one, I addressed each man in the room, calmly recounting instances where my invisible hand had protected them, enriched them, or saved them from their own mistakes. By the time I finished, a heavy silence blanketed the room. Richard finally spoke. What exactly are you proposing, Alina? As I said, a named partnership. Alina Vasquez Montgomery, equal to any other partner in this room. Public acknowledgement of my role in the Eastern Properties and Singapore deals. And Daniel's resignation effective immediately. And if we refuse? Richard asked, though his tone suggested he already knew the answer. Then by morning, Montgomery Financial will be facing federal investigation, and each of you will be answering very uncomfortable questions about your knowledge of financial improprieties. I paused. Some of you might survive the scrutiny. Most won't. Mr. Lim, who had been silently observing the exchange, suddenly spoke up. For what it's worth, My colleagues and I would be very comfortable working with Mrs. Montgomery directly. Her understanding of our investment priorities has been exceptional. That statement hung in the air like a verdict. Richard exchanged glances with several board members, unspoken communication passing between them. The board needs to discuss this privately, he finally said. Course, I agreed, picking up my purse. You have until 9 a.m. After that. My attorney will proceed as instructed. As I turned to leave, Daniel finally found his voice. Alina, please, he begged, his face crumpled in desperation. Don't do this. I'm sorry about what I said. I was drunk, showing off for the guys. I don't think of you that way. I studied him dispassionately. This man I had once loved, once believed in. The handsome face that had charmed me, the confident smile that had made me feel chosen and special. Now I saw only weakness and fear. The problem, Daniel, I said quietly, is that you've always thought of me exactly that way. The maid you elevated who should be eternally grateful. Never your equal, never worthy of true respect. That's not true, he protested, but the lie rang hollow even to his own ears. 7 years, I continued, my voice steady. For 7 years. I'd been the woman behind your success, the mind behind your achievements, the network supporting your rise. I leaned closer, dropping my voice so only he could hear. And all that time, you never once saw me. Really saw me? His eyes filled with tears. I love you. No, I replied simply. You loved what I could do for you. There's a difference. Without another word, I walked out of the boardroom, leaving behind a room full of powerful men who had just realized how much power they didn't have. In the elevator, I allowed myself a moment of pure, uncomplicated satisfaction. Not at destroying. Daniel, that had never been my goal, but at finally stepping into the light, at claiming what was rightfully mine. By the time I reached the lobby, my phone was already buzzing with messages. The board, it seemed, didn't need until morning to make their decision. 1 month later, I stood in the same ballroom where Daniel had humiliated me, but the circumstances could not have been more different. The room was again filled with Montgomery Financial's elite and their most important clients. But tonight, the celebration was for a new partnership announcement. The first female partner in the firm's 30-year history, Alina Vasquez Montgomery. Financial brilliance and strategic vision will help lead Montgomery Financial into a new era, Richard declared, raising his glass to the assembled crowd. Applause filled the room, genuine this time, tinged with a healthy respect that bordered on fear from those who now understood exactly who they were dealing with. I wore red, not the demure navy blue of Daniel's supportive wife, but a bold, powerful crimson that made a statement all its own. My speech was brief and gracious, acknowledging the unexpected circumstances that had led to my partnership while focusing primarily on the future. What I didn't mention was Daniel's abrupt health leave that everyone knew was a permanent departure, or the frantic damage control the firm had done to prevent my evidence from reaching the authorities, or the substantial settlement that had been quietly negotiated to ensure Daniel would never work in finance again. Congratulations, Lisa Chen, the Singapore Investors Council, approached me after the formalities concluded, though I must say I'm not entirely surprised. I always sensed there was more to you than met the eye. I smiled. Sometimes being underestimated is its own kind of power. Indeed, she agreed. My firm is very pleased to be working directly with you now, though I admit I'm curious about one thing. She lowered her voice. How long had you been planning this? I considered the question carefully. I hadn't been planning it at all, I answered truthfully. But I had been preparing for it. There's a difference. Lisa nodded in understanding. And Daniel, have you spoken to him? No, I replied simply. There's nothing left to say. Daniel had moved out of our penthouse the day after the boardroom confrontation, a broken man. The last I'd heard, he was staying with his brother Miguel, struggling to come to terms with how thoroughly his life had unraveled. The divorce proceedings had been quick and remarkably civilized, largely because Daniel had no leverage and knew it. I kept the penthouse, half of our joint assets, and most importantly, my hard-earned position at Montgomery Financial. You seem remarkably composed for someone who's been through such upheaval, Richard commented, joining me as Lisa discreetly moved away. Change isn't always a bad thing, I replied, sipping my champagne. Sometimes it's just overdue. Richard nodded, thoughtfully. I owe you an apology, Elena. I knew how integral you were to Daniel's success. I should have recognized your contributions years ago. Yes, you should have, I agreed, without rancor. But we're moving forward now. Indeed we are. He glanced around the room. The Singapore deal closed this morning. Largest in our firm's history. I know, I said with a small smile. I signed the papers myself. As the evening wound down, I found myself on the terrace overlooking the city lights. The same view I'd walked away from 3 weeks ago, but everything had changed. I was no longer invisible, no longer just a maid. Miss Vasquez. A soft voice interrupted my thoughts. I turned to find Gabriella, one of the catering staff, hovering nervously at the terrace entrance. Please call me Elena, I said warmly. Elena, she repeated, stepping closer. I hope you don't mind me saying, but what happened at the last party? What your husband said about you being a maid? She hesitated. Go on, I encouraged. I'm working as a caterer to pay for my college classes, she said in a rush. And hearing him mock you for doing honest work, then seeing you come back like this. Her eyes were bright with admiration. ... It meant something to a lot of us. I felt an unexpected tightness in my throat. Thank you for telling me that. After she left, I remained on the terrace, reflecting on the journey that had brought me here, from cleaning houses to partnership at one of the city's most prestigious financial firms. It wasn't the path I had expected, but perhaps it was the one I had needed to take all along. My phone buzzed with a text message from Miguel. He's asking to see you. Says he needs closure. Your call entirely, but thought you should know. I stared at the message for a long moment before typing my reply. Tell him I'll meet him tomorrow. Coffee shop on 8th, 10 a.m. Some endings needed proper closure, and perhaps some new beginnings did too. The coffee shop on 8th Street was deliberately chosen neutral ground. It's public enough to prevent a scene, but quiet enough for a private conversation. I arrived 15 minutes early, selecting a corner table with a clear view of the entrance. At exactly 10 a.m., Daniel walked in. The change in him was shocking. Just 1 month had passed, but he looked like he'd aged years. The competent swagger was gone, replaced by hesitant movements. He'd lost weight, and dark circles shadowed his eyes. He spotted me immediately and approached uncertainty in every step. Elena, he said softly, standing awkwardly by the empty chair across from me. Thank you for meeting me. I gestured for him to sit. Miguel said you wanted closure. Daniel nodded, wrapping his hands around the coffee cup I'd ordered for him, black with 2 sugars. The way he'd always taken it, I hardly know where to begin. The beginning is usually a good place, I suggested, keeping my tone neutral. He took a deep breath. I've had a lot of time to think about us, about how I treated you. His voice cracked slightly. I didn't see it. How I gradually started taking you for granted. How I never gave you credit for your work, your ideas. You saw me as a possession, I said calmly. Something you'd acquired and elevated, not a partner. He flinched but nodded. Yes, and I can see now how wrong that was. How blind I was, too. Your brilliance. He looked up, meeting my eyes directly. You were always the smart one, the one with vision. I just had the right connections, the right background, the right look. The admission surprised me. Daniel's ego had always been his most defining characteristic. Hearing him acknowledge his limitations was unexpected. Why are you telling me this? Because I need you to know that I understand what I lost, he said quietly. Not just the career or the money, but you. It's the most remarkable woman I've ever Known. For a moment, I felt the ghost of something old and almost forgotten the connection that had once drawn me to this man. But it was just that, a ghost. "I appreciate your honesty," I said finally, "but it doesn't change anything." "No," he replied, his shoulders slumping slightly. "I didn't come here to win you back. I know that's impossible now." He hesitated, then reached into his jacket pocket and withdrew a small notebook. "I came to give you this." I took it carefully. The leather cover was worn, the pages obviously filled with handwriting I recognized as Daniel's. "What is this?" "My client journal," he explained. "I've kept it for years. Notes on every client, their preferences, their weaknesses, their secrets." He swallowed hard. "Things I use to manipulate deals. Things that aren't in any official files." I stared at him, understanding dawning. "Why would you give me this?" "Because it belongs to someone who knows how to use it responsibly," he said simply. "And because it's the only thing of real value I have left to offer you." The gesture was unexpected. A surrender of his last remaining advantage, his personal database of inside information that had given him an edge throughout his career. "Thank you," I said finally, slipping the notebook into my bag. "That can't have been an easy decision." "Easiest decision I've made in years. Actually," he replied with a sad smile. "Lena, what I said that night about you being just a maid was unforgivable." I finished for him. "Yes, but it's worse than that." It revealed something ugly inside me, something I never wanted to see about myself, which is that I built my sense of worth on feeling superior to others, including you. He looked down at his untouched coffee. "Especially you." The admission hung between us, raw and honest in a way Daniel had never been before. "What will you do now?" I asked after a long moment. "Miguel's offered me a position at his consulting firm." Starting at the bottom, he gave a humorless laugh. "Ha, ironic, right? The great Daniel Montgomery getting a job through family pity. It's a chance to rebuild," I observed, "on a more solid foundation this time." He nodded slowly. "That's what I'm trying to do." He hesitated, then asked, "And you? Are you happy with the partnership?" "It's a start," I replied honestly. "I have bigger plans." Something flickered in his eyes, recognition, perhaps, of the ambition I'd always harbored, but he'd never fully acknowledged. "I have no doubt you'll achieve them," he said softly. He glanced at his watch and stood. "I should go. Thank you for meeting me, Alina. It means more than I can say." He turned to leave, then paused. "For what it's worth, and I know it's not worth much, now I am proud of you. I always was, even when I couldn't show it properly." As he walked away, I felt an unexpected weight lift from my shoulders. Not forgiveness, exactly, but something like resolution. The closing of one chapter before the beginning of another. Outside the coffee shop, rain had begun to fall, washing the city streets clean. I watched the drops trace patterns on the window, and thought about the path that had brought me here, the houses I had cleaned, the invisible work I had done, the strength I had found when it mattered most. I took out my phone and dialed the number I'd been considering calling for days. "Ria, it's Alina. Remember that business idea we talked about years ago? I think it's time we revisited it." My old roommate's excited voice filled the line, and I smiled. The future beckoned, full of possibilities that had nothing to do with Daniel Montgomery or the life I'd left behind. 6 months passed in a whirlwind of activity. My partnership at Montgomery Financial flourished, with new clients seeking me out specifically after word spread about my financial acumen. Richard, true to his word, gave me free rein to develop my own division within the firm, focusing on sustainable investments and ethical business practices. But my ambitions had always extended beyond Montgomery Financial's walls. "Are you sure about this?" Richard asked when I presented him with my formal notice. "You've barely gotten comfortable in the partnership." "I was never interested in getting comfortable," I replied, sliding the documents across his desk. "This was always a stepping stone." He sighed heavily, but there was respect in his eyes. "I suppose I should have seen this coming." The woman. Who orchestrated her own ascension was never going to stop there. The terms are more than fair, I pointed out. I'm leaving my client list intact with appropriate transition plans for each account. My team will remain to ensure continuity. And in exchange, you want our blessing to start your own firm, one that will inevitably become our competitor. I smiled. I prefer to think of it as healthy market diversification. Richard studied me for a long moment before nodding slowly. You know, when Daniel first brought you to company events, I thought you were just arm candy. Pretty polite, deferential. He shook his head ruefully. Biggest misread of my career. We often see what we expect to see, I observed. It's a common human failing. He signed the release documents without further protest. What will you call your new venture? Vasquez Partners, I replied. A woman-led investment firm focusing on supporting businesses owned by immigrants and first-generation Americans. Richard raised an eyebrow. Niche market. A vastly underserved one, I corrected, with enormous potential for growth and innovation. As I left his office for the last time, I felt not triumph, but quiet satisfaction. This departure was different from my exit from Daniel's promotion party. Planned, controlled, and entirely on my terms. The next morning, I stood in the newly leased offices of Vasquez Partners, empty now, but full of potential. Floor to ceiling. Windows offered views of the city's skyline, including the Montgomery Financial Tower several blocks away. So, this is it, Maria said, joining me at the window. My former roommate, now my chief operations officer, surveyed the empty space with obvious approval. From cleaning houses to this, your mother would be proud. I thought of my mother, who had cleaned houses her entire life to give me opportunities she never had. Who had taught me that no honest work was beneath dignity, but that I should always strive for more. She would tell me not to forget where I came from, I replied softly. Which is exactly why this will work, Maria said, gesturing to the business plan spread out on the loan table in the otherwise empty room. No one understands the immigrant entrepreneurial spirit better than we do. The elevator dinged, announcing the arrival of our first employees. A carefully selected team of brilliant financial minds who had been overlooked or underestimated by traditional firms. Women returning to the workforce after raising children. Immigrants with degrees from their home countries that American firms didn't recognize. Young people from disadvantaged backgrounds with raw talent but no prestigious connections. Vasquez. A young woman approached nervously, clutching a portfolio. I'm Jennifer Lynn, your new financial analyst. I just wanted to thank you for this opportunity. After 3 years of rejections because my degree is from China, ... Your qualifications speak for themselves, I interrupted gently. And please, call me Alina. As the office gradually filled with my new team, I stepped into what would become my private office to collect my thoughts. On the bare desk sat a small potted plant, a housewarming gift from Richard with a card that read simply, "To New Beginnings." My phone buzzed with a text message from Miguel. Daniel saw the announcement about Vasquez Partners. Is proud of you. For what it's worth, so am I. I set the phone down without replying. Daniel's pride no longer mattered to me, though I appreciated Miguel's ongoing kindness. A knock at my door pulled me from my thoughts. Lisa Chen stood in the doorway, impeccably dressed as always. I hope I'm not interrupting, she said. Your receptionist isn't set up yet, so I just followed the voices. Lisa, I greeted her warmly. This is a surprise. A pleasant one, I hope. She entered, casting an appraising eye over the empty office. My clients were very disappointed to hear you were leaving Montgomery Financial. I hope they understand it was time for me to pursue my own vision. They do, she assured me. In fact, they've authorized me to inform you that they would like to be Vasquez Partners' first clients with a significant initial investment. I blinked in surprise. The Singapore consortium represented billions in potential investments, far more than I had dared hope for in my first year of operation. "That's extraordinarily generous," I said carefully. "May I ask why?" Lisa smiled. "They believe in backing winners. And they've seen firsthand how you operate with integrity, intelligence, and an uncanny ability to see opportunities others miss." She paused. "Also, quite frankly, your personal story resonates with many of them. People who built empires from nothing understand the value of that perspective." Later that afternoon, as my team celebrated our first major client acquisition, I stepped away to the quiet of my still unfurnished office. Through the window, I could see the lights coming on in buildings across the city as dusk fell, including the Montgomery Financial Tower, where just 7 months ago, Daniel had called me just a maid in front of everyone who mattered. I was building something of my own, something that honored both where I had come from and where I was going, something that would provide opportunities for others like me. People with talent and drive who just needed someone to see their potential. My phone rang. Gabriella, the young catering server from the party who is now my executive assistant studying business administration at night, just as I once had. "Ms. Vasquez, sorry, Alina. The furniture delivery is delayed until tomorrow. And there's a reporter from the Wall Street Journal here. She wants to do a profile on you as the maid who built an empire. Should I send her away?" I smiled at the title. Once, it would have stung like salt in an open wound. Now, I wore it as a badge of honor. "No, send her in," I replied. "I think it's time to tell my story. All of it." As I waited for the reporter, I looked around at the empty office that would soon be filled with life, purpose, and possibility. The journey from cleaning houses to founding my own investment firm had been long and often painful. But standing here now, I wouldn't change a single step. Daniel's mockery had been meant to diminish me. Instead, it had become the catalyst for my greatest triumph. 3 hours after he'd called me just a maid, they had needed me desperately. But I had needed only myself. The annual Finance Industry Excellence Awards were held at the Grand Hyatt, bringing together the city's financial elite for a night of recognition and carefully orchestrated networking. As founder and CEO of Vasquez Partners, I'm now the fastest-growing boutique investment firm in the city, my attendance was expected. I wore emerald green, a color I'd always loved, but Daniel had considered too attention-grabbing for the supportive wife of an up-and-coming executive. My firm had been nominated for 2 awards, Most Innovative New Firm and the Impact Investment Excellence Award, for our work with immigrant-owned businesses. "Nervous?" Maria asked as we entered the ballroom. "Not at all," I replied truthfully. "We've already won, regardless of what happens tonight." Our table was positioned prominently near the stage, a testament to how quickly Vasquez Partners had established itself in the industry. Richard Montgomery stopped by to offer his good wishes, genuine respect having replaced the wary caution that had characterized our early interactions. "Montgomery Financial misses your touch," he admitted, "though I can't say I'm surprised by your success." "Thank you, Richard," I said sincerely. "And how is Daniel doing at his brother's firm?" Richard's expression softened slightly. "Finding his feet? From what I hear, without your assistance, he's had to develop new skills. Think it's been good." For him, as if summoned by our conversation, I spotted Daniel across the room. He looked better than the last time I'd seen him, healthier, though without the polished arrogance that had once defined him. Our eyes met briefly, and he offered a small, respectful nod before turning away. "Ladies and gentlemen," the host announced, "from the stage, it's time to present the award for Most Innovative New Firm." I listened as the nominees were read, feeling Maria squeeze my hand in excitement when Vasquez Partners was announced. And the winner is ... Vasquez Partners. Applause filled the room as I made my way to the stage, accepting the Crystal Award with a composed smile. "Thank you," I began, addressing the room of financial leaders who now regarded me as a peer. Innovation often comes from unexpected places and unexpected people. At Vasquez Partners, we believe that diverse perspectives lead to better investment strategies and that talent can be found in places most firms never think to look. I paused, scanning the attentive faces before me. 5 years ago, I was cleaning houses to pay my way through business school. 2 years ago, I was the invisible force behind someone else's success. 1 year ago, I was publicly dismissed as just a maid. A ripple of uncomfortable recognition moved through the audience. The incident had become something of an industry legend. Today, I lead a firm that has outperformed market projections by 23% in our first year of operation. Our client list includes some of the most discerning investors in the global market. And we've helped 14 immigrant-owned businesses secure the capital they needed to scale operations. Creating over 300 new jobs in our community, I smiled, lifting the award slightly. So, if there's one lesson I hope my journey teaches, it's this. Never underestimate someone because of where they came from or what they did to survive. The hands that cleaned your houses might someday build something you never imagined possible. The applause that followed was thunderous, a standing ovation that continued as I returned to my seat. Later that evening, when Vasquez Partners also won the Impact Investment Excellence Award, it felt like confirmation of everything I had worked for. As the formal ceremony concluded and guests mingled over dessert and coffee, a familiar figure approached our table. "Congratulations, Alina," Daniel said quietly. "It's truly well-deserved." "Thank you," I replied, noting the genuine admiration in his eyes. So different from the condescension I'd once grown accustomed to. "I won't take up your time," he continued. "I just wanted to tell you that watching you build Vasquez Partners has been inspiring. You've created something remarkable." There was no bitterness in his words, no hidden agenda I could detect. Just simple acknowledgement from a man who had finally learned to see me clearly. "We all build our own legacies, Daniel," I said. "I wish you well with yours." He nodded, understanding the gentle finality in my tone, and moved away to rejoin his brother's group. Later that night, as my car carried me home through the city streets, I reflected on the journey that had brought me here. From the young woman who had arrived in this country with nothing but determination, to the business leader now recognized by an industry that had once dismissed her. The memory of that promotional party, of Daniel's mocking words, and the laughter that had followed no longer held any power over me. It had become simply one more stepping stone on a path that was entirely my own. I was Alina Vasquez, founder and CEO of Vasquez Partners, former Maid immigrant, self-made success. And I was just getting started.